What do you know? It's 9 weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast. It's not the NESCAC season, but we're back. We've got some info for you.
Is it September? Did I miss something?
It is. I'm looking outside. It is not September, but there's plenty to talk about. Alongside Dave Bagatelle, Chris Grace back with you, and this is a special off-season edition of 9 Weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast. There's a lot going on in the world of NESCAC football, and
a lot going on in the world.
What we do have is we have the NESCAC for the first time, potentially. There's a path where the NESCAC could be competing in Division III postseason play in football. And we're going to touch on that a little bit later. And we have a great interview with Vaughn Seelicke, who is the Tufts Jumbo Junior place kicker. And he and some other players from the NESCAC have started what's called the NESCAC Football Players Association. And their main goal is to try to get some equality amongst football with all of their contemporaries. And they want to see if they can match up with the best that there is in Division III. And we're going to talk to Vaughn, a great kid. He has a lot to talk about, but that's a little bit later on. For Dave and I, just an opportunity to catch up, my man. And we're in the midst of the Division III basketball season. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, not that you would be a Wesleyan Cardinal fan, but if you were, Wesleyan Cardinals currently, the time of this podcast, undefeated and number one in the country for the first time in program history. Ran through the entire regular season and the NESCAC regular season.
First time ever.
Yeah, first time ever with a perfect season. And they, I think at the time of the airing of this podcast, will be preparing to host the NESCAC semifinals, which will be Wesleyan and Tufts and Hamilton and Trinity. So that should be a great weekend, and that'll take place in Middletown. I unfortunately will not be on the call for that because I have a real job that is taking priority. I asked off and they told me no, so that's that. But please tune into that on the NESCAC network or on NSN Sports this weekend. It should be great hoops action. Coach Riley and the Cardinals and Tufts and Trinity are really good, and Hamilton's really solid too. Those are 4 teams that all have more than 20 wins. It should be a great NESCAC semifinals and championship. NESCAC football, I know we're coming off a great year. Wesleyan winning their first ever outright NESCAC football championship, and obviously we're really looking forward to everything that next year has going on. For now in the offseason, Dave, give it to me. What's on the docket that we need to catch people up with? What's going on in your world?
This is we got basketball, so we're going to be at the NESCAC tournament this weekend. It's also opening weekend for lacrosse. Very exciting weekend in the NESCAC. You got obviously the winter season winding down with NESCAC tournaments, NCAA tournaments, and as always, great to see the NESCAC schools well represented in all of those. Should be a good weekend up at Wesleyan. You've got the Wrestling New England Championships on campus on Saturday. You've got Wesleyan hosting
Boy,
Colby.
that's gonna be a first come first serve kind of situation there.
Oh yeah, tailgate's starting early, Chris. We're gonna have a big tailgate. Weather's supposed to be great.
I'll zoom in.
We'll FaceTime. Okay. And then, of course, the Wesleyan Hamilton game at 1:30, and then Tufts Trinity at 4:00 in Seelicke Gymnasium on the Wesleyan campus. And then we're getting into spring. So we got lacrosse and baseball and softball and all that excitement. Tennis, of course. Yeah. So it should be good. And then also, bring it back, we've got NESCAC spring football practice coming up here next couple weeks. Some of the schools will be starting. Most of the schools are winding down on their recruiting. I think they just have regular admission left, but by now 95% of their classes are filled. As far as recruiting, we follow all the schools through social media. They can't officially announce the recruiting classes yet. You can get a gauge because the schools can't announce, but the incoming players certainly are pretty
vociferous on social media for
yeah,
sure.
they're out there assuming that they're being open and honest. You can at least directionally get a sense of who's going where and what the classes look like. I think some of the NESCAC schools encourage their recruits a little bit more than others in terms of publicizing whether they're going to a particular school or not. As far as I'm not going to start ranking schools in terms of
Yeah.
recruiting classes, but from what I can tell, it seems like the usual suspects are doing well recruiting wise. The top teams in the league are having another good season, good recruiting. They're going to have good recruiting classes, and they're going to be replenishing what they've lost. I think the interesting thing, the story coming into the season, and we can segue into what the preseason, in my mind, way too early preseason rankings look like. But I think the story of 2025 is going to be about the quarterback position. We've got
There's
changeover
none
with
left, man.
there's none left. So just about, I think 6 of the 10 schools will have new starting quarterbacks. And even 2 of those 4 that have quarterbacks coming back, big question marks at the position. Really, the only 2 schools that I think at the quarterback position that have solid starters are Middlebury and Colby, who have solid starters. Both of them have solid starters coming back. The other 2 schools that have, there's 3
Right.
schools technically, of Amherst, who had a freshman play. He'll be coming back. Williams, which he was benched at the end of the year. We had Owen McHugh on, and
Who
then
knows whether that
who
was
knows
injury or,
exactly. So
but
there's
they
there
have some level of experience coming back.
Hamilton and the
And
quarterback.
Bowden, the freshman at Bowden played a little bit down the stretch and looked good at times.
The other schools, some of the schools are going to be experimenting with, you've got kids that were backups coming in and trying to fill big shoes. You look at Trinity and Wes and Tufts, all 3 of those schools um, have been in the mix the last couple of years, but they all have big quarterback shoes to fill. And Wesleyan and Trinity they've had a great track record at the quarterback position. Really, you look at Wesleyan, which I'm most familiar with, last 15 years,
Really?
they've been very solid at the position. Trinity always seems to have stellar next man up. Even though both teams are going to have new players at the position, something tells me that they'll figure it out, that it's not going to, they'll end up filling that with somebody that can play, that'll be more than adequate. It's going to be an interesting year. The quarterback, let's face it, we've talked about it before, all levels of football, starting right in high school. If you don't have a quarterback, the way the game is designed nowadays, you're just not going to win. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Just having a quick look at your way too early, if we should say, preseason rankings. I think that there is a lot to be said for the fact that pretty much every school is going to be playing with a clean slate, and we're going to know a whole lot more in the 3rd week of September than we know right now. But just hearing what you just said, the thing that just came into my mind is on the offensive side of the ball, Middlebury is going to bring back a lot of guys. They're losing a lot of guys from the defensive side of the ball, but they have a defensive head coach. I think Middlebury maybe will start the year as a 1A, maybe to Trinity's 1. And then I think you look at a school like Wesleyan, who has some key players coming back, a few key players coming back on defense, but lost a lot of players. In particular, lost a lot of explosiveness on offense. And it's going to come down to what they get at the quarterback position. And obviously, the biggest thing, you know this, you win football games if you have a good offensive line and a good defensive line. Everything else, you can figure it out. You can have a great quarterback, and if your offensive line stinks, you're not going to know he's a great quarterback, and that could change real quick. And so there will be a lot, obviously, to see. And then there's the X factor, which is Bates, which is a team that does things a little bit differently. And now we're talking about year 3 in a system that, is very unique to what they do. And I explained to him that they won 2 games this year. And he said, "They didn't win any of the year before." I said, "That's right." And I said, the 2 games they won were against 2 of the 3 best teams in the league, including the conference champions.
Absolutely.
So that, if nothing else, tells you that their system is designed to give problems to the best of the best. Get one more year of that, I think people are going to be on the lookout for Bates. And I think if we saw anything this year, it was the most balanced that NESCAC has ever been. And I don't expect it to be any different next year. So very
Yeah, I
interesting.
mean, I think Bates is going to be in the mix this year. They've got arguably the best running back in the league coming back, Ryan Linsky, very good player. They're going to experiment at quarterback. We hear that they're playing around with moving Sergio Beltran, who's a very skilled receiver. He played quarterback in high school. They're talking about moving him to the quarterback position. They run the option. So to have an athlete,
because that's one thing they didn't really have was they didn't really have someone behind center, not to cut you off, but even with their successes, they did not have a quarterback behind center that was really a threat running the football within their option scheme. Most of their success came from Linsky and then came from one-off deep passes off of the threat of what they were doing with the option. So it'll be really interesting if they can pull that off.
Like you said, look, it's year 3. They had these underclassmen. These kids are going to be juniors, have played a lot of NESCAC football. Some of them have played already in their short careers. They played 18 games already. So they're going to be somebody to watch out for. I think it's a big jump getting from that sort of bottom middle toward, going to getting into the mix. I think they look
6 wins is a good.
Yeah, I was going to say 5. Getting to 500 would be a huge jump for them, and that sets them up for the following year to really compete it. Look, you've got to play Trinity and Middlebury and Tufts and Wesleyan. You got to still play Williams. That's getting to 5 wins. And by the way, Bowdoin and Colby, that's big rivalry for them. And anybody can win any of those games. They play those games in November. It's cold and they play at night. It's anything can happen. I think a big test to really see where the teams are is always going to be that week 1. That I look at that Wesleyan Middlebury game. Those 2 teams should probably be 2 of the better teams in the league. Just like last year, it was a really litmus test to see who was going to be in the mix at the end of the year, playing out that way. So we'll see. It's season is we're not even in practice yet, but I'm just thinking that we're going to have
a niche, Dave. You're just creating a niche.
Absolutely. It's exciting. The other, besides the playoffs, the other, I think, big stories, and we can take these in any order, but obviously the roster limits is a big story. Since COVID, they've had the NESCAC expanded. They used to have a roster limit. The roster limit was 76 players. After COVID in 2020, because you had kids taking extra years, they had extra eligibility. They suspended that, and you saw really 4 schools in the league took advantage of that. Trinity, Tufts, Wesleyan, and Middlebury. All of those schools had upwards 95 to plus. Trinity was running well over 100 kids. They didn't have to cut anybody. Obviously, when you travel with overnights, you had a roster limit, but when you were home, they suited up a lot of kids and they practiced a lot of kids. I think some of the schools in the league, in particular, from what we understand, Amherst and Williams were big time pushing against that. And as it stands right now, and from what we hear, there may be some movement afoot to possibly play around with the number, but where the roster limit sits right now on February 25th is 84 student athletes.
Should be plenty.
But you can't practice with more than that. So there would have to be.
That still should be plenty.
But here, the problem is some of these schools have been running a lot more. So in order to, and if you had a decent recruiting class, they're going to have to cut some players. But yeah, it should be plenty. D1 is now at 105. I think there's some
still Division III football. Listen, at the end of the day, it's Division III football. If you can't figure it out with 85 guys.
The only thing to think about there is if we do go to the playoffs, where you're playing the Mountain Unions and North Centrals of the world, and they have rosters that are 110, 120 kids. So it's
an active roster on an NFL Sunday, Dave.
Oh, I know. It's 47 or whatever it is, 50, whatever.
You can figure it out. Okay. There's a lot of donations being made so that people can make rosters. Okay.
I hear you.
85 is plenty.
I hear you.
85 is enough for D3 football. That's my take.
I think some of the
good. You can figure out what you got, if you got a guy or not. Okay.
I think some of the coaches would like it to be in the low 90s. Right.
Plenty of people to hold headsets. There's plenty of room.
Hey, I'm just here to bring up the issues. So that's an issue. The first issue, of course, being the playoffs. The second being the roster limits. The third, but I think this would be next up on the hit parade. Certainly not for this year, but I think the schools, if we do go to the playoffs, would love that. a 10th game. I had a league game. There is a week there where you could do it. You could start a week earlier. I know when I played in ancient times in the mid-'80s, we used to play 7 NESCAC schools, and we'd play one out-of-league game. So there were 2 schools that we didn't play. The schedule rotated, and our out-of-league game would be, for every team in the league, their
Coast
out-of-league
Guard
game,
or whatever.
yeah, would be a traditional rivalry. So we played Coast Guard. Williams used to play Union. Middlebury would play Norwich. I think Trinity also played Coast Guard. Yeah, it was cool. You'd play in at one out-of-league game. And the argument for that, if you will, is if the NESCAC ever wanted to get an at-large team in there, it allows you to benchmark against an out-of-league school. It's also fun to see how you compete against other leagues. I'd love to see Wesleyan play an MI Springfield. And by the way, in JV, we scrimmage a lot of these schools. So you do get a chance at the JV level. It's different, but you do get a chance to see how you compete against some of those schools at JV level. But it would be great to see West or any of the NESCAC teams play one out-of-league game. So I think that'll be
South. There's plenty of schools. Yeah, I hear you.
Or even play Hopkins.
But that's that to me, Dave. That sounds like you want your ice cream sundae, and you want it drenched. You want it drenched in a cold Guinness at a room temperature.
Let's just look. It's from my standpoint, it's one more opportunity to tailgate. That's the way I look at it. So
hey, listen, there was only 4 home games this year. You're not gonna have to sell me on that. I only get to do the home games.
Hey, if we add the 10th game, the playoff game, forget the extra game, the playoff game, whoever the NESCAC teams are, wherever they're playing, I'm all over it. So the hot topic that's out there is we're in the middle of the combine. We got the draft coming up, and hey, we got a NESCAC player in the mix. Possibly be drafted, be the first NESCAC player drafted in a number of years. We also have some other NESCAC players in Phil Lutz, who played at Tufts, who plays leading receiver at Delaware, and Logan Tomlinson, who was the leading receiver at UNH, played at Wesleyan, of course, who are potential free agents that could latch on with a team. Really interesting. Thomas Perry, very big, very strong, very fast. Middlebury offensive lineman, All-American player, D3 at Middlebury. Got the opportunity to play in the Shrine game and held his own against pretty top competition. Apparently, he's going to be at the combine. From what we're hearing, he's going to score very well. That's going on this week in Indianapolis, and he'll score very well. He's a big, strong kid. He's talented athletically. Really interesting to see if somebody takes a flyer on him in a late round. It's a cool thing. We're rooting for him. We're friends with Coach Mandigo, and Coach Caputi is the offensive line coach up there, former Bowdoin head coach, longtime Williams coach. We're for Thomas Perry. It'd be great to see his name called. Yeah.
All things NESCAC are good from where we stand. And not to throw you under the bus because it was an unprepared question, but I did see, maybe it was a month or so ago, a D3 All-American list that came out, and there were a few NESCAC guys on there. I think it's an appropriate forum for us to give them a shout out. So I'll defer to my man here. I'm sure you have it memorized by heart.
Yeah, I think we mentioned Thomas Perry.
Yep.
I think Tomas Kennery was made one of the teams. Wesley Abraham from Wesleyan made one of the teams.
Don't forget about your boy.
Who's that?
Best punter in the land.
Oh yeah, Hoy from Hamilton.
Yeah, that's right.
Love him. He was an All-American. There were a handful of NESCAC guys who made All-American. I think it was the most NESCAC guys on the All-American team in years. And then NESCAC really did well at the All-New England level. It was a great year for the NESCAC. Certainly a great year for me in the NESCAC. But
it keeps getting better, man. You're living your good life. The only thing that you don't have going for you is this is the only thing you don't have going for you.
I got the shirt on. We'll see what happens. We'll see how he is. He's a 3-tool player, Chris. Come on.
Hey, he's a 4-tool player.
He's a tool, all right.
750 tools he's got. 750 million tools.
He just can't handle the pressure in the Bronx. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's right. I thought I remember him hitting a big home run to get them to the World Series, but I could be mistaken. I might have misremembered that.
I'm looking forward to Garrett.
Roger Clemens.
Looking forward to Cole going up and in on the first pitch to him when he faces him in June.
We'll have to be healthy still in June to be able to finish it. But I hear what you're saying. No, but there's plenty to look forward to. I think, and then just one last thing in terms of returning guys. We've been we'll have time to preview this. We'll find a time. This isn't going to be a weekly thing here, but we're going to mix in a couple episodes. As long as you're subscribed, you'll know when the episodes come out. But I think there are a few guys coming back on the defensive side of the ball. I think Dylan Connors has to be a unanimous preseason All-American and preseason potentially NESCAC Defensive Player of the Year. On the offensive side of the ball, there aren't as many guys that really jump out to me as returners. I think Middlebury's got a couple of really good running backs that potentially are coming back. There's a lot of talent that's leaving the NESCAC this year on the offensive side of the ball, so it's just going to be really exciting to see who steps up. Oh, DiNapoli still has eligibility, right?
Yeah, he's back.
There's your offensive preseason player.
I think you've got Ryan Linsky, who's going to be back. You got DiNapoli, who's back. Nolan O'Brien at Trinity is back.
Geez. Okay, they're going to be okay.
Those are some really good players. The wide receiver Middlebury, I believe, is back.
Yeah.
I mentioned Beltran. He's going to be moving to quarterback. He was an all-league receiver. Speaking of receivers, Cade Moore is back. And then on defense, I think the guys to watch on defense are in the defensive backfield. I think it's Dylan Connors is obviously guy you want to watch, and Luke Harmon at Amherst, very good player. Plays a hybrid defensive back, linebacker.
Oh, and Mangini too.
Mangini as a freshman.
Great last year.
Was great. Great run stopper. Ty Richardson at Tufts would have been in the mix. He's going to be transferring, or he's transferred. He's done. That's a big loss for them. But yeah, I think there's a number of really strong players back. Of course, there's a lot of players that are graduated as well. Hey, my alma mater, for example, I think Wesleyan lost. They were league champs, and usually have your senior laden when you're league champs, senior and graduate laden. I think they lose 18 of their 22 starters. The one positive is the way you play nowadays is there's a lot of rotation, and the kids that are going to be filling spots, frankly, have seen a lot of action, but it's a lot of new starters. And then you got to replace that all over the league, frankly. That's every team.
Well, we'll have plenty of time to think about next year, but we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have the pleasure of talking to Tufts Jumbo place kicker and the head and the founding member of the NESCAC Football Players Association. He's going to tell us about what's going on with the hopes of the NESCAC maybe expanding to 10 weeks at a minimum. That's Vaughn Seelicke. We'll be talking to him when we come right back. This is 9 Weeks NESCAC Football Podcast. Back with more right after this. Welcome back to a special off-season edition of 9 Weeks NESCAC Football Podcast, along with my co-host Dave Bagatelle. Chris Grace back with you, and it is our pleasure to welcome in Tufts Jumbo place kicker Vaughn Seelicke. Vaughn has taken the onus and taken the role of chairing the NESCAC Football Players Association, who have many missions, but the main mission is to create an equality when it comes to postseason football. Their goal is to get the NESCAC to follow suit with the Ivy League and give what we think is one of the best Division III leagues. Obviously, if you listen to this podcast, you think it's one of the best Division III leagues and you're connected to it. We don't want their season to end on 9 weeks. We're hoping that we can change the podcast to 10 weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast for next year at a minimum. Welcome into our show. We appreciate you taking some time to speak with us.
Definitely. Thank you guys for having me. It's an honor.
So Vaughn, real quick, for those who don't know, tell us what your journey has been, how this whole thing started, and then we can get into the details of what you're up to. But start from the earliest stage, where the idea came from, and who's been alongside backing you along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that even whenever I was getting recruited to Tufts, there was talk of us going to the playoffs. I remember it being a huge issue, or not issue, but something that I was hoping for whenever I committed to Tufts was the ability to play in the playoffs. It was talked about, and it just hadn't really happened. Despite for years, even talking to alumni, it's been talked about for a long time. But whenever the Ivy League changed their rule, historically, the NESCAC has followed suit. So I think that me, along with a number of members of our Players Association, went, oh, this is our chance to really get what I believe should have been a thing for a while. The iron was hot with the Ivy League changing their standards. So there was a huge groundswell of support. And at Tufts, me and then Vince Gilchrist and Justin Keller, the other two members of the Tufts committee for the Players Association, got together, started sending some emails, spoke with Mason Shipp, the Yale football player who pretty much went through this process with the Ivy League, and really started pulling guys in either through friendships, through SAC representatives, through mutual connections. Like Dave helped us fill out the consortium. But at the end of the day, we were able to get at least one member from all NESCAC schools to help represent us in this Players Association. And we are currently in the process of petitioning, but submitting formal proposals to the NESCAC to hopefully change this rule, and at the end of the day, allow NESCAC athletes, football included, to compete on the national stage and really show what the NESCAC is about.
So Vaughn, great to have you, and congratulations on a great season and a great career thus far at Tufts. I know you got one more coming up, and I know you're looking forward to a great year up in Medford, with Tufts Jumbos. But so April 3rd is, as I understand it, the presidents are having the spring meeting, and that I guess your hope is to have this on the agenda and have it come up for vote. What is the process, and where do you all stand in the process, and what are the next steps?
Absolutely. So actually, there's a date earlier than that. March 5th, there's an athletic directors meeting, and we've been told that the NESCAC going to the playoffs will be on their docket of things to discuss. I'm not sure exactly if that's going to be a vote or if that's going to be more of just speaking about it. But through all the guys that we have that have been speaking to their respective ADs, we've been told from multiple ADs that will be on the docket of things to discuss. So right now, our main goal is to try and get every AD to hear about it before that date. I know that I was just talking with some of our guys earlier today. We're making great headway. Lots of ADs are in support, and a decent number of other ones are maybe not going to say it, but are leading the way of us to hopefully make this change. And then obviously, like you said, the president's meeting, we're hopefully going to use the support of the ADs in this meeting to bounce towards the presidents. I know that myself and a few others had positive conversations with presidents at our own respective institutions, but at the end of the day, we need everyone to be on board. So that's really our main goal right now. We have all of our representatives from different schools reaching out to their athletic directors and their presidents, setting up meetings, and really doing what I'm doing right now, just running through why we believe that we should have the opportunity and talking about any pressure points that maybe different schools might have as to why they wouldn't say yes. So right now, I would say the process is going well, but at the end of the day, it's all up to the president's vote, like you said, on April 3rd. We'll keep doing all that we can to obviously get it in front of them and try and get support. But at the end of the day, it's all on them.
Vaughn, one of the things is someone who's covered the NESCAC for a very long time that I think is so great is the traditions and the history of some of the rivalries. We'll do games sometimes, and it'll be like, it's the 123rd matchup. And it's like, how is that even possible? Like helmets were, and such. And it's obviously the same with the Ivy League, but sometimes the institutions that have the most history are the slowest to change. And I guess my question for you would be, you said that you spoke to the Ivy League representatives. From your experience in those conversations, what do you think was the key factor in them getting it across the line? Because obviously I would imagine you're going to piggyback on some of those same tactics and same ideas.
Definitely. I think that the main reason the Ivy League stated that they hadn't changed, which is most of the same reasons I'm hearing from the NESCAC, not directly, but obviously through people, is that they're worried about academics first, which obviously is a huge focus of both conferences. And obviously being a student athlete, I agree with. I think that academics, there's a reason that we all came to NESCAC schools, or in the Ivy League's case, Ivy League schools. We came here to get a great education and have the opportunity to continue to play sports. So the NESCAC has always traditionally said that they were worried that extending the season might run into finals and might make it tougher for athletes to succeed. Our rebuttal to that is that there's lots of other high academic D3 teams that are already competing and having great success. Obviously, MIT and schools like that are competing, but the best example for us is Johns Hopkins, one of the best schools in the nation, and they just made a really deep playoff run in the playoffs of D3 football. So I think that we'd stand there and go, Johns Hopkins isn't failing out. Their guys aren't unable to take that stress. And if that was the case, then they would be doing the same as us and not participating. So I think that their participation for years and their lack of academic drop-off is really something that we feel should be touched on. I think that the Ivy League and the NESCAC both have the opportunity to send players to the playoffs and have a generational moment. Personally, I think that going to the playoffs would be a life-changing moment for anybody. And I think that the type of students and the type of athletes that come to the NESCAC are accustomed to juggling school and football. We do it for 9 weeks a year. And I think that the opportunity of going to the playoffs is worth maybe a week more of juggling both. I haven't spoken to any athlete that is not willing to maybe take a little bit of academic strain for such an opportunity.
And last I checked, there were 3 NESCAC schools in the soccer Final Four that was held in Las Vegas. So there's certainly some precedent for some Division III athletes taking some time away from their studies to participate at the highest level. And it's treated the NESCAC pretty well, having 3 schools in the Final Four. So I think if you look 10 years down the road, some of those big schools, these D3 powerhouses, the Mount Unions, those kind of schools, Wisconsin Whitewater, those schools have been doing this for a long time. But I think the NESCAC has proven that when given an opportunity and given a platform, they will compete at a national stage in a very quick turnaround. So I certainly hope that ends up happening for you guys in the near future.
I was going to say, I remember in 2018, Wesleyan was in the lacrosse championships actually on graduation day. So those seniors didn't even graduate. They were playing all through finals. So I think that argument, just my opinion, plenty of other sports, every other sport in the NESCAC participates in the playoffs, goes over finals, it goes past school years. I think that argument, and by the way, the student athletes that play in all these teams are high academic kids. They're balancing schoolwork and athletics and a lot of other activities on campus at the same time. I think it's an insult to the student athlete telling football players that they can't handle it. I think that's just bunk in my opinion, but that's Dave Bagatelle's view, not the NESCAC's view. And I don't even know if it's my co-host's view, but that's just my opinion. But I know your guys, you have a representative, at least one at every school. I'm sure they're making the rounds with the ADs. I'm sure where they can, they're talking to the presidents. I'd love to, without you saying any names and without counting up the votes, what are you hearing as on the pro side the most from those folks in those conversations? And what are you hearing on the flip side of the argument from a con perspective, those that aren't supportive?
Yeah, I think that the main, I guess, con, which I'm not necessarily sure is a con, is that the NESCAC traditionally has always been slow to accept change. Chris touched on earlier. And I think that we've heard through some people that maybe the NESCAC, they're just going to do it next year. Oh, we'll accept it next year, but we're not going to worry about this year, which obviously to me and all the other seniors that are about to be for this season go, if you plan on doing it next year, then just do it this year. I only have 1 year left. The majority of the guys that are on our Players Association only have 1 year left. And I think that dragging your feet, I guess, for one more year, to me, doesn't seem to make much sense. Obviously, because we already get the automatic bid from D3 and we turn it down every year. There's such little red tape to be cut. The NESCAC just needs to say yes. So I guess I would say that for me personally, and obviously for a lot of people that are about to be seniors, it's a transformational opportunity that I guess would be really unfortunate to miss just because, we'll do it next year. And I guess from the pros, we put out a poll to as many players in NESCAC as we could get. And we had overwhelming support from players and from coaches. I would say that the main pros that we've heard is that presidents want to listen to their players and want to listen to their coaches. We've had conversations with other teams on campuses as well. We've spoken with women's teams on certain campuses about their support as well. So I think the main pro is that the presidents want to listen to the people, which I guess is kind of part of their job. They want to do what's best for the athletes. And I think that we've been able to convey our message strongly about it being such a pro athlete experience. The athletes are also in support. So I think that's the main pro, is that we have a lot of bodies that want the same thing.
Yeah, the thing that kind of irritates me about all this is that it's not easy to win an NESCAC championship. I've been covering Wesleyan for a very long time. Dave is the biggest Wesleyan. Sorry, not to break news to anyone who listens to this podcast, but Dave is the biggest Wesleyan supporter ever. And they had a historic year this year in which they found ways to win 4 or 5 games that if they played them 10 times, they might have won one of those 4 or 5 games. And they had this magic year and then it just ends. And I think as an athlete, yes, winning an NESCAC championship is incredibly special. But what's more special is having an opportunity to test yourself against this. You grew up in the South. The difference in football in the North and the South, and the Northeastern teams always want to play teams from the South because they want to see if they can match up what's perceived to be the best. And it's no different here. I guess my long-winded question is, not to throw you under the bus, but is there potentially, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but is there any potential legal standpoint that you guys could take to try to push this forward if for some reason that it doesn't go through? Or has that even been discussed? Is that something that you guys have looked at, whether it comes to an equality, a Title IX, something of the like, without you saying more than you can say? I'm sure there's something there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that our goal at the end of the day is to not touch anything like that. We just hope that we can present the argument in a convincing way to the presidents. They say yes, and we all go home happy April 3rd. But I think that whenever we set out, obviously that wasn't our intention, but we've had people reaching out to us, actually lawyers, things like that, would like to maybe try and do something like that. For now, we aren't particularly interested. We would like to just go through the typical channels. But I guess, like you said, there are roughly probably 750 male student athletes that aren't able to compete like everybody else, which I think maybe Title IX might not agree with. So at the end of the day, I suppose it is a possibility, but that's not something that we would like to see as a first, second, or hopefully even third option. But I think that, like you said, there's possibly some basis for it, but that's not something that hopefully we'll need to figure out.
A statement and then a question. Statement is, for those of our viewers that aren't aware, there basically would not have to be any change to the schedule. The NESCAC schools typically start their seasons about a week after, just because I think the rule is they can't start practicing till the freshmen are on campus. So the NESCAC schools generally start practice the last week in August. They start their season, generally speaking, a week after most other D3 schools. Of course, NESCAC does not play any out-of-league games. We just added about 8 years ago the 9th game, so they play every team in the league once, so they play 9 games. The season ends, the Division III playoffs do not begin until 2 weeks after the NESCAC season begins, I believe. So there wouldn't be any need to extend the schedule, alter the schedule as is right now. Could stay. The D3 playoffs start after. NESCAC automatically every year gets, as a league champion, gets a bid. And whether they would get a large bid or get 2 bids, that remains to be seen. You could have had both of them in the playoffs. And then for the away teams, the NCAA has a 65-man roster limit when you travel. Division III playoffs and the Division III NCAA pays for the travel. They foot the bill for that. So there'd be no cost to universities. So with all that being said, there's really no logistical reason for this not to happen. But I want to ask you different questions. Let's talk about football. Let's be hypothetical here for a second. We make the playoffs. We all know NESCAC historically, as far as the President's Cup is concerned, the Learfield Trophy, NESCAC usually wins or is first or second just about every year. It's the top, arguably, D3 conference in the country. I've heard other people from other teams around the country saying, oh, NESCAC won't be able to compete in football. They're going to get destroyed by the North Centrals and the Mount Unions and blah, blah, blah. Yet, in every other sport, NESCAC does just fine. I have a different view of how NESCAC schools would do in the playoffs. I'm just curious about how the committee feels, how you feel, how Tufts feels about how we would do against the Springfields of the world, the Cortlands of the world, the Mount Unions, the North Centrals of the world, the powerhouses in D3 football.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's obviously a tough question to answer without playing out of conference games. But whenever I've been asked this question, I always respond with, look where NESCAC graduates are going, at least from Tufts. Phil Lutz just was the leading receiver at Delaware. Jaden Richardson transferred to USC. His little brother Ty just went to one of the best FCS teams in the country, UC Davis. From Wesleyan, Nick Helbig went to Wake Forest. I know you guys have sent some guys to Furman.
Logan Tomlinson at UNH.
Yeah, UNH. We have a graduate student right now who got an offer from Stony Brook, the lineman. I guess I would say that's really my best answer to the question is we have obviously the talent that can compete on D1 Power 5 level. I guess I would say that with the amount of talent that the NESCAC has, I feel optimistic that we can compete with anybody. I don't feel comfortable maybe going on here and saying we're going to go win national championships every year or anything like that. But I think that we would give a competitive game to almost anybody. I think that based on that, it's another reason that I really want to be in the playoffs, even if it's not Tufts that gets to go. I think that, like you said, Wesleyan had a great team this year. Obviously, with having Jack on our Players Association and players from Middlebury and Trinity, I've spoken to them about how it feels to end a season. Your NESCAC champs, you got the best feeling in the world. And it's see you next year. I think that's just, it's really unfortunate. And obviously for the seniors, especially, you don't get to really see what you're made of. And I think that especially certain NESCAC teams throughout the years could have really put together great playoff runs. So I think that it's a question that I'll answer with a question. Well, let's figure it out. Let's get to go.
Yeah, I think that's a spectacular point, because at the end of the day, the answer is let's see. And the only way that you could see is let's play the games, right? I'm pretty sure that Butler was in the men's basketball national championship 2 years in a row. I know they were because my team beat them one of those years. I'm pretty sure that Boise State beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl when no one thought that they had a chance. We've seen this throughout time at the highest level. And it's not like we're talking about the little sisters of the poor here. These are big schools with a lot of endowment, with a lot of resources, with proud alums, with great facilities. What are we doing here? Right now in men's basketball, the number one team in the country currently is in the NESCAC. There's 3 teams that are ranked in the top 12 in the country in men's basketball in the NESCAC. There's multiple teams in women's basketball that are in the top 10 in the NESCAC. Every single one of them on the women's side, national championships are coming from the NESCAC. On the men's side, multiple teams have won national championships in men's hockey, in men's lacrosse, in every sport you can count on. And soccer, 3 of the 4 teams are in the Final Four. It doesn't get any more obvious than that. So to me, it's just insulting to the athletes, and it's insulting 100%. To the process. And it's such a simple scenario, because guess what? If you're really worried about it, it's 1 week. And if they're not competitive, it's 1 week. And if they are competitive, then you made the right decision. There's plenty of people like the guy that I'm talking to right now, and I don't mean you, Vaughn, that will make sure that those schools don't get embarrassed in the future, and that they have all the resources and the potential, so that maybe if someone's thinking about transferring to a low 1AA school, they're like, maybe I'll stay here and try to play for a national championship before I go on that route. So I think it's a no-brainer. And I commend you for taking the onus and really getting on the forefront here, because it'd be really easy to just sit there and take it in stride, because you don't know. Tufts has never won an NESCAC championship. I'm sure right now you're working hard so that it does benefit you, but it might not. But it could be.
It's coming soon.
But regardless, Dave was saying that for 40 years.
Heck, we couldn't win a little 3 for 45 years.
There you go. And that's against 2 teams. You just don't know. But when you do get to that point, I think everyone deserves a chance, right? I think that's why the NCAA Division I basketball tournament is the best thing in sports, because every single team of the 317 Division I teams, for the most part, play a conference tournament. Every one of them has a chance to win a national championship. And that's all you want. So kudos to you for that. So I guess as you're doing your publicity tour here and you're trying to make your waves, is there anything that any of the listeners can do? Is there anything that anyone can do? Are there any petitions out there? Is there anything anyone can do to support that maybe we haven't brought up yet, that even if it's just to write a note to a president of a school? What are you telling people to do if they want to support that aren't directly connected to your football program or a football program in the NESCAC?
Yeah, we have a petition on change.org. The name's something like "Let the NESCAC go to the playoffs." And right now, I think it's got a little over 3,000 signatures. So that's great. Obviously, we're a little worried that maybe the presidents won't just see a big number and say yes. So that's why we're doing obviously all the work that we are speaking to them. But obviously, I think it's a great way to show support. Like you said, if you're unconnected with football programs, the NESCAC or the NESCAC in general. So obviously, speaking to whichever school that you may be connected to, really anybody helps. But obviously, athletic directors and presidents are the people that are going to be making the decision at the end of the day, reaching out to those people. But I think that the thing that everybody can do is obviously the petition. And then we have a Twitter and Instagram page at NESCAC FBPA that we've been sharing. Obviously, all the articles that we've had written, we were able to get into AP Sports, Boston Globe, a few other places, which is really exciting. So reposting things like that, just interacting with the content would be great as well.
So let's say you got face to face with a college president, or if there's a message you wanted to send to a college president, you wanted to look them right in the eye, and it's not me, it's whomever the president from Tufts is or any other school. what message would you want to say to them at this particular juncture?
I think that right now at this juncture, I would like to say something that they've said in the past. There's a quote that says that the NESCAC is built on excellence in all aspects. And I think that right now, obviously, academically, the NESCAC is one of the greatest conferences in D3 and I believe in the country. And all of our other sports programs get the opportunity to compete and have great success on the athletics field. I would just ask that they make that statement true and allow the football teams to also compete like every other team on campus does. And at the end of the day, allowing them to do that or allowing us to do that would be excellence in all aspects. So we're just hoping for the equal opportunity to compete on the highest stage, because at the end of the day, that's what we all came to college to do. We came to college to win, to have success, end up with a great job, but we really would like to chase a national championship.
Look, Vaughn, unless Dave has something else, I'd like to just change gears here, because I think we've done a good job and you've done a great job of getting your platform across to everyone. For those who don't know, there aren't many players in the NESCAC who come from the state of Arkansas. And when I was doing a little research before, I noticed that you're from the Little Rock area and that you went to a high school that some might know around football, Pulaski. And the cool thing about Pulaski was, and if you ever watched, I think it was like a real HBO Real Sports, I think it was Real Sports that did a documentary on them a long time ago. Pulaski had a coach who had one major philosophy, which was being ahead of the game. He never punted, ever. And he onside kicked on every single kickoff. Now, what more perfect person to talk to than someone who's a place kicker who went to said high school?
In my 4 years, we totaled 0 punts, ran 4th downs from our own end zone more than a few times, and I kicked 8 field goals in 4 years. So it's two field goals a year on average. So it was
how many extra points?
We started kicking extra points whenever we started mercy ruling people, which was actually somewhat frequent. So I think I kicked probably about 20 a year, but obviously had great success, which was amazing. Won 3 state championships in 4 years. And I think now the streak is something like 9 state championships in 11 years or something. So It was a great place to be. Obviously, as a kicker, it was a little unique to get recruited. Didn't have a lot of game film, so had to send out a lot of practice film. But at the end of the day, I'm really grateful for my high school experience. And I'm also grateful for the coaches at Tufts taking a bit of a flyer on me, and obviously grateful for that opportunity.
Like, those are free possessions. Have you ever just say, hey, check the tape out?
I definitely think that it's something I always joke with them about. I kicked 1 onside kick so far in college, and we didn't get that one.
You got to drop in there.
When we have Coach Sivs on, we'll have to bring that up and talk to him about the strategy there, see what he thinks.
Might have to hold the cards close to his chest.
So, Vaughn, one last question for me, just to shift away, and thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. And it's been really great, actually, the last couple of months, getting to know you a little bit better. I'll echo what Chris said. I think it's amazing what you're doing. Whether you're successful or not, you're to be commended, because I think you've laid the groundwork for the future here for the league. Kudos to you as a huge NESCAC fan. Both Chris and I are both huge NESCAC fans. This is what NESCAC's all about. So congratulations on that. But love to shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about Tufts 2025. We're in the winter. I'm sure you started your training for the season. You got spring practice coming up here probably in the not too distant future. How's Tufts looking for the year? How is recruiting? How's conditioning going? What can we expect from the Tufts Jumbos in the fall this year?
Thank you. I think that I'm really excited. I think that we have a lot of returning pieces, but also the exciting part is we have a lot of new guys. Obviously, we lost Michael Berluti, our quarterback, who's been the quarterback for all my years here so far. So I think that we have a lot of guys that are excited to compete for the job. And personally, I feel that it can really go any way. We have Aiden McLean, who's a fellow senior, so always rooting for him. But we also have 2 younger guys that are really great prospects, and I think have worked really hard. So I think that really one of the great things about being at Tufts and with the guys that I'm with is I could really see any of them playing and really excelling. So at the end of the day, I think that we have some returning pieces, but we also have a lot of guys that are hungry to prove themselves. And I'm really excited to get to Bowdoin on week 1 and really see what we have, because like you said, you only get 9 of them. So you got to make everyone the best you can. But I think that it'll be hopefully another strong year for the Jumbos. My first 3 years here, we've made some runs at NESCAC championships, but have always come up a little short. So obviously optimistic that my senior year, hopefully we get into the playoffs, we win the NESCAC championship and something crazy happens in the playoffs, but we'll see. I'm optimistic. And obviously with so much other great talent around the league, it's really hard to say.
Look, I can speak for both of us for saying that we hope that there's more than 9 weeks next year, but at a minimum, we appreciate you for laying the groundwork because we know that it's only a matter of time, and hopefully they don't rest on their laurels here and punish your senior class, like you said, just because. So hopefully the work you've done is not in vain. I'm sure it won't be, but we'll certainly be paying attention in a few weeks' time, and we'll be pulling for you from afar. I know one of us will most certainly be more dialed in than the other, but I'll be paying attention as well. All the best, Vaughn. We certainly appreciate you taking some time, and please let us know if there's anything we can do to help you along the way.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been an awesome experience. I want to also thank obviously all the other guys in the Players Association. At the end of the day, I guess I got the ball rolling, but they've all been really great doing media things and speaking to their own respective schools, which is something I could never do alone. So I think I definitely want to give recognition to all those guys for the work they've done as well.
Good luck, Vaughn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Vaughn Seelicke, senior, incoming senior, about to be senior place kicker for the Tufts Jumbos, on the forefront of the NESCAC Football Players Association as they look to get the NESCAC into the college football Division III playoffs for next year. Dave and I will be back in just a second to wrap this up, but for now, we'll take a quick break. Welcome back to 9 Weeks, NESCAC Football Podcast. Once again, we'd like to thank Vaughn Seelicke for giving us some time and expanding our knowledge on everything that's going on. Dave, it's been fun to catch up. We look forward to doing this again. We've got some more guests right around the corner as we continue to update people on what's been going on with this whole playoff situation. And we look forward to speaking to one of the coaches we didn't get to talk to at all last year. And we look forward to hearing his opinions on their season, their upcoming season, and everything that's going on. Someone who's going to have a lot of interest in whether or not the NESCAC can take part in the college football playoff at the Division III level, and that's Trinity head coach Jeff Devanney, and we look forward to talking to him in the next week or so. But for now, it's been a pleasure catching up, my man. Always great to see your smiling face, so I look forward to doing this again.
Great seeing you too, Chris. Thank you.
But for now, this has been a special off-season edition of 9 Weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast. For Dave Bagatelle, for Vaughn Seelicke, I'm Chris Grace. We hope you've enjoyed what we have brought to you, and if you haven't, you don't have too many other options, so you're stuck with us. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your week, whatever day you might be listening. So long, everybody. Welcome back to 9 Weeks, an unofficial NESCAC Football Podcast alongside Dave Bagatelle, Chris Grace back with you, and we are very pleased to welcome in long-standing and most successful head football coach in the NESCAC, representing the Trinity College Bantams, Jeff Devanney. So nice to join us, Coach. First of all, a long time in the waiting. We're happy and pumped that you could join us. Both Bags and I admire your program and everything that it stands for, and at any level to have extended excellence is a challenge, but in a non-scholarship Division III sport that has limitations that are sometimes out of your hands, and we'll touch on that as we go on. It's incredibly impressive to have the longevity and the year in and year out success for you. So first and foremost, congratulations on all the success your program has had, and welcome to our humble little podcast.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate being on here, and you guys do so much to just promote NESCAC football, which I think NESCAC football is just a unique. All the in all their sports are very unique, but NESCAC football is certainly a unique thing that's really cool, and so many just great human beings come through these programs that I appreciate what you guys do to promote us.
We certainly have enjoyed this entire experience. Let's just get right into it, though. There's a lot going on right now. Last week, we talked to a player representative about the potential of the NESCAC making its way into the NCAA playoffs, which I think is something that's been long overdue. And looking at your tenure, you're probably the most viable person to talk to about this, because you have probably personally suffered more than anyone else affiliated with NESCAC football during your time. I think the writing is probably on the wall that's going to happen at some point. But how excited are you, first and foremost, that there is a real distinct possibility that your team is going to have a chance to measure up against the best teams in Division III football?
Yeah, I would agree with you. The time has come now that the Ivies have done what they've done. I don't see how the NESCAC presidents can keep holding back these student athletes in the NESCAC from having this opportunity. It's funny, last year at Trinity, our men's basketball program was not only got to the Final Four, but hosted like the Sweet 16 on the same weekend that our men's ice hockey team was hosting the Frozen Four. And I remember our president came up to me at the hockey game and said, "Isn't this an amazing experience for these student athletes?" And I said, "Yeah, wouldn't it be incredible if the football student athletes could have this same experience?" And today I'm actually both our basketball teams, as your guys, Wesleyan's basketball teams had a great season as well with Joe Riley. Our women's basketball team is playing at NYU this weekend, and I am the administrator that travels with the team. So I was on a Zoom today, the NCAA Zoom, getting all organized. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, like, this should be what the NESCAC football teams are doing. They should be having the same opportunity. All the other NESCAC athletes actually get to play in a NESCAC tournament and then go to the NCAA tournament. And the football players don't get any of that. And I just think we're well past the time for them to have that experience.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, and we talked about it ad nauseum last week, but you think about the fact that there was 3 or 4 NESCAC soccer schools that were in the Final Four that play in the fall season, and that Final Four was in Las Vegas. That certainly didn't seem to interfere with their academic achievement in any way, shape, or form.
The hypocrisy is crazy.
It is.
Our women's lacrosse team for 5 straight years played in the NCAA finals. For 5 straight years, our women's lacrosse players missed final exams and graduation.
Yeah.
Which I think that was, the school did everything, bent over backwards to let those women have a great experience and let them play in those games and have those experiences and create a separate graduation for them and create extra opportunities for them to take their final exams. And for the presidents to say the football players can't do that it's been laughable for years.
And you can't even make the argument anymore that it's a dollars and cents thing, right? Because the NCAA foots the bill for the travel on the football, right? So just to shift gears, certainly the playoffs is one hot button. There's several this offseason. The other is the notion of roster limits or limiting the number of student athletes that can actually participate in football, because it isn't just suit up. They're talking about a hard limit on the number of players on the team and on your roster. I think the number, like historically, we were talking earlier, it was 76 for many, many years. Then, of course, during COVID, went away from roster limits completely. And now we've come back to the number, at least the way it stands right now, is 84. As I understand it, there's still some debate to be had on that. I know you're in a certain camp on this subject, and love to hear your point of view on this.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking me that. I was always very opposed to the roster limit, even when it was back to 76. I just feel like we're playing Division III athletics, and we should let each institution determine, just like all the other sports, determine what their roster size is. And there's, at least I know at Trinity, we're never going to get to 120 because we have admission standards and we have locker room size issues and things like that. But when you're allowed to have an institutional decision, you're able to make choices based on what you have in your program that year. So in other words, we had a kid on our team this past year who didn't play football as a sophomore and a junior because of some serious mental health issues that he had dealt with. And he had been in and out of school, and he had finally found a therapist that worked for him, and he'd found the right medication, and he felt like his family felt like he was in a safe place. And he asked to play. And because we didn't have a roster limit, I said, "Listen, I have no problem with you playing. I think you're a nice young man, and I don't know that you'll ever get on the field. But if those are the situations you're allowed to do when you're not capped by the league." And that kid never dressed in a game for us, but he was at practice every day, and he was with his friends, and his parents basically said it almost saved his life in a sense that he was able to do that. And a couple of years ago, our athletic director asked me to stay around 100. He's, "Listen, I know that you have 110 players, right?" Because we were letting kids walk on. We're doing what most Division III schools do. "Hey, you can walk on if you're a good kid and you show up and you work hard, even if you're not a great player, we're going to let you participate." So we were doing that. And we got to 110, and our athletic director said, "Listen, Can we just get it to 100? And so I cut a few kids and I got to 102. And I went to our athletic director and said, we're at 102. If I have to cut anybody else, it's going to be a freshman or a senior. And he was like, I don't want you to cut a freshman or a senior. Just stay at 102. So those are the things you're able to do when it's an institutional decision and not a cap that's mandated by the league. And I think that's where we should be at. And we're at an era where we're not doing slots in NESCAC anymore in admissions. And we're not meeting and saying, these are how many C bands we use and how many B bands we use. And each institution is doing its own thing that makes sense for its own institution. We should be doing that for our sport as well. We do that for all the other 30 sports at Trinity. And while as an institution, we cap some of those sports, those are institutional decisions that you can have some flexibility on based on who you're dealing with and who you want to, as a coach and an athletic director, talk about keeping on the team. It makes no sense to me. I've always been so anti against it. This is Division III. I played at Trinity in an era when there was no roster, and the kid that was the 100th player was a terrible player. He wasn't them. He wasn't ever getting on the field, but he loved being on the team. He loved coming to practice. It was part of his identity. And why do we take that away from those kids? It doesn't make sense to me.
Just came to me. Would you be opposed to them saying something to the extent of you could have an 84-man roster limit for the year, meaning you could only have 84 guys that have even the potential to appear in a game, but you could keep, the NFL would do a 20-man or a 22-man practice squad of some kind, so that maybe you would say that such and such freshmen, they're not redshirting per se, but something creative so that you could still create that culture. Do you think that's a potential solution?
100% I'd be for that, Chris, because I have no problem. I did this when we had the 75-man roster. I had conversations with kids that I said, listen, I think you can play here someday, but there's no way you're going to play here this year. And I have to be at 75 players. So I'm going to have to cut you, but I don't want to, if you want to still play football at Trinity, I would be happy to say you're still part of our program. Some of those kids ended up being all league players 3 years later.
Yeah.
So I have what you just proposed, I think, is what we should be doing. I have no problem saying to the league, here's the 84 kids that may or may not show up in a varsity game, but I'm not cutting the 87th kid. I'm going to let them practice. But I'll tell the 87th kid, you're never going to play in a game. So your choices are you can walk away if you want, or you can stay and practice and be part of the program. Just understand you're never going to play in a game.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Some of the schools in the league that have smaller rosters, a couple of years ago, I remember Williams was decimated by injuries. They were suiting up low to mid 40s at the end of the day. I'm not sure that's safe either on the other side.
That one year when we had the 75-man roster, we had a year where we were practicing for the Amherst game with 54 players. Yeah. Because when you have that 75-man roster, you can't replace kids. So you're like, here's my 75 kids, everybody else is cut.
Right.
It was awful. And I don't know how some schools maybe couldn't get to 75, but we would always be at like 85, 86, 87. And then we would have to make those decisions to get to 75. And quite honestly, at Trinity, we could have gotten to 100 and had to cut 25. We were purposely not letting people play, which drove me nuts. Because I'm like, this is Division III. Why are we not letting this kid have an opportunity to participate?
Yeah, perfect example. You talked about your kid who missed some years and then came back and you let him back on the team, which is a great example. And you won't like to hear this example, but as you may or may not know, I've been calling play-by-play for Wesleyan for the last, I don't know how many years, a lot of years. And the kid who caught the game-winning touchdown pass against Williams and had a big game against you guys this year was a baseball player who was a fill-in player for the football team who got opportunities in year 4 because he was allowed to be on the roster for those years. And he caught his first touchdown pass of his career in the penultimate game of the year and had a big game against you guys in essentially the NESCAC championship game. That kid is not anywhere near the football field if there aren't roster limits. I mean, if there are significant roster limits. Yeah, I think it's insane.
That's a great story. And I know that kid, and I watched that play against Williams, and I watched him beat us, obviously. But my point is, I could tell you way more stories of kids who never got on the field for us.
Yeah.
Refused to go away. no matter how many times I told them, dude, you're a great kid. I like you a lot. You're never going to play here. Why don't you go play rugby? Why don't you go do? And they were like, no, I love the team. I love the camaraderie. I love the work ethic. And down the road, most of those kids are going to be multimillionaires.
Yeah.
Most of those kids have a 3.8 GPA. And when Trinity's asking them for money 20 years from now, they're going to give money because they're going to be like, I had a great experience.
Yeah.
But if we cut them and basically say, hey, screw you and your identity, go do something else, they're either leaving the college or they're not going to have the same positive experience at the college. And I don't know why we would do that.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm not going to make the argument that you get into the playoffs, you're going to start going up against these schools that have 120, 130, 140 kids, like the Cortlands and North Central. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But going back to
some of the people are in the league now. We're talking about the competitive advantage of the different sizes and rosters. Why don't they talk about that in the other sports? Williams has 38 lacrosse players. Tufts has 65. Trinity has 29 baseball players. Tufts has 45. Some of the women's swimming programs in our league, there are 65 women's swimmers. Some of the schools have 22 women's swimmers. Where is the outcry about the competitive imbalance in all the other sports?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But going back to the playoffs, because this is a really interesting thing to me, and you would have been the league's representative a number of times since you started there at Trinity 18, 19 years ago. How do you watch a lot of Division III football? I'm sure you have friends that coach at a lot of these schools that do very well. You see some of the high academic schools like the Hopkins of the world and Muhlenberg and have had some success at the national level. How do you think a Trinity team or a Wesleyan team this year, or how do you think the number one team in the league would do on the national level? And of course, we know NESCAC has a ton of success in the other sports. So there is definitely a track record, but football is a little bit different. I get that.
I think the really good Trinity, Williams, Amherst teams of the past 20 years would win a few games. I don't know that any of us are beating Wisconsin Whitewater,
Right.
Union. But then again, you see it with the hockey programs and the lacrosse programs, and the soccer programs, and the basketball programs. But I do think those sports, like you mentioned, Dave, they're different sports. You don't need as many. You don't need as many players. But it is. I don't know. I just think it would be interesting and fun to see. And I think that the football student athletes deserve the same experience that the soccer and hockey and basketball student athletes are having.
Yeah. My dad went to Union, right? And obviously in their day, when Al Bagnoli was there, Coach Worth, they did very well at a national level. And certainly they used to play pretty much an NESCAC schedule. But world's different now. I get it, but it'd be great to see. It'd be, and who knows, perhaps soon enough we will see. Be exciting.
I hope so. It will be exciting.
It almost feels like there's an infrastructural conflict between the administrators, or I don't want to use the term administrators, but some people who just don't understand that the amount of people that support and love football within this league. Yeah. And it's such an antiquated approach. And the fact that the Ivy League is able to come to terms with that, what seems so obvious, all it would take is go to a Wesleyan Williams game and see 10,000 people tailgating and tell me that there's not passion for something like that. Go to the Trinity Wesleyan game. You can keep going. Obviously, Amherst Williams, everyone knows about that. But even go to one of those Bates, Bowdoin, Colby games, and there's 8,000 people. It's a big deal, and it's changed dramatically from when I was a kid growing up in this area. They just need to get with the times and understand that to your point, most of these liberal arts universities are pretty much founded in equity and diversity. And it's a pretty alarming contrast that there's not, I shouldn't say founded, but believe in equity and diversity is probably a better way of putting it. But it's pretty alarming that they're not fully embracing something that seems so straightforward and obvious.
Yeah, I think at the higher level, I have a very supportive alum, really involved in our program. He's class of 61, so he's been around for a long time. And if you ask, he knows more about the history of Trinity and Wesleyan and football and NESCAC than anybody I think alive. He was on the board of trustees at Trinity for many years, and he just says it's just the fact of the matter is there's just a stereotype in that room about football. And maybe that's changing, I hope, because I think the stereotype is so outdated. I know that the current football players at Trinity, they go to class, they get 3.7 GPAs, they do community service. It's not like it maybe was in the 70s and when I played at Trinity. These kids are phenomenal human beings. And I hope the stereotype's going away. I think there's been a lot of change at the presidential level. I think there are some presidents who support the playoffs. So I think that's going to happen. I unfortunately don't think there's enough schools in our league that care about the roster limit. There might only be 2 or 3. So it really might come down to a Mike Whalen and a Mike Roth, and maybe our new president or maybe the guy at Tufts caring enough about some of these experiences of the 93rd and 94th kid to say we're not going to have a league-wide mandate. So that my stance on it, I think that the playoffs have to happen. There's no way at this point the presidents can do it. They're just going to get sued. The roster limit, I think, is going to come down to a couple very strong presidents at some of the institutions that care enough about the 93rd kids experience to say we don't need to have a mandate from the league.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like we've talked about that to a point. We'd be doing an injustice, Coach, if we didn't talk about some of the successes you've had at Trinity. Obviously, growing up, Trinity in my lifetime, it wasn't a power in Division III football. It was a place where it felt like you went to a high school game on Friday, and then you'd go to Trinity on Saturday afternoon. It'd be a nice little fun experience. And then since you've taken over, the narrative has certainly changed. The days of Williams and Amherst just dominating the league went away. Talk about the early days. And I know you have a ton of experience at Trinity, both as a coordinator and obviously inevitably becoming a head coach. But talk about how you've been able to maintain this sustained success, because no one within the league has been able to do what you guys have done over the last, let's call it 20 years.
Thank you for acknowledging that, Chris. That's something we're really proud of. The 2 answers I'd give you is, first of all, Chuck Priori deserves a ton of credit for that, because when he took over the program from Coach Miller, who obviously is a legendary coach at Trinity, he transformed just the whole professionalism of Trinity football and the way the recruiting cycle. And at this level, it's all about recruiting. So Chuck changed the way Trinity football recruited. And when I worked for Chuck, he was very transparent with us as assistants. So we met way more than anybody wants to meet when Chuck was. But because of that, I knew everything about what he was doing, so that when I was given the opportunity to run the program, I basically just copied his blueprint. And then I was just really lucky. I don't know if it was luck or skill a little bit, that I hired Lou Accarullo and Mark Melnitsky and Denver Williams, and they haven't left, right? So I've got some incredibly talented coaches that share my vision of what it takes to be successful at the Division III level. And they've been with me the entire time. And so my first 5 years as head coach, I was like Chuck. We were meeting an insane amount of time. Probably everybody was just as pissed at me as I was at Chuck. But now we've gotten to the point where we've all worked together for 20 years. And we don't have to kill ourselves in meeting. We all know what we're doing. We all have the same philosophy. We all understand what the task is at hand. And when you, as a head coach, have those kind of assistants, it's like life altering.
Yeah, you've got a great staff, and obviously it's definitely showing up in the wins and losses. There is a lot of continuity. I think if you look at the better teams in the league, they certainly have that continuity on the staff. There isn't a lot of turnover. The coaches have been there for a long time. They know how to work together, and they have a system, a great system, which clearly You all have. No doubt about that. Speaking about system, it's heading into 2025 or in 2025. Obviously, you're probably just about wrapped up with the recruiting. Not to give away any secrets, but not used to coming in second in the league. I'm sure you're going to have probably a new signal. You'll definitely have a new signal caller this year. We had Xander on the podcast during the year. By the way, great young man.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. And we had one of your former players, Cooper, on as well, who's a neighbor of mine here in Jersey. Another fantastic young man. So you are turning out some great kids, by the way. Just say that.
You picked a couple real smart ones to talk to right there.
They did a good job.
I could talk about, if you want to talk about roster limits, like, yeah, Mandel was cut as a freshman. He didn't make the 75-man roster.
It's crazy.
And he turned into being one of the better players we've ever had.
Yeah, excellent player, all-league player, and very good player. But how's recruiting going? How's the team looking heading into 25? There's going to be a lot of turnover here in the league, a lot of new quarterbacks, a lot of new players, a lot of longtime starters and quote unquote stars are graduating both sides of the football.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the season? What are your thoughts on Trinity football heading into this season?
Yeah, you hit on a couple of the hot topics. Coming in second in place pisses us off at Trinity. So it's pretty much been a daily discussion in our off season. And you also mentioned we have to replace the quarterback, which I say that I've been saying this with college football. There are no veterans. It's all about you turn over, you lose Walter Fallis, you lose kids like that. You can't replace those kids. Spencer Fetter, you can't replace that. You're not getting the same player as that. So you've got to find ways to get everybody else to raise their level. And in the NESCAC, when we used to not have spring practice, this would really cause me a lot of anxiety that we don't know who our quarterback is going to be, because you would go into preseason with like basically 10 practices to decide who's going to quarterback going to be. But now that we get those 10 spring balls, like our 90% of our focus, while spring ball to me is all about elevating kids, teaching kids and developing kids, 90% of our focus is it's a quarterback competition. So let's do everything we can to make sure in those 10 practices, we're putting a lot of pressure under the quarterbacks that are in our system so that when we come out of those 10 practices, we can say, this is the guy that we are going to choose to be our leader going into the fall. And that hopefully we have some really talented kids, and there is nobody right now that I'd say is a favorite. It just comes down to after 10 practices, we're going to say, this is the guy.
Yeah, and obviously it's got to feel pretty good that you know that you have some dynamic guys coming back on the offensive side of the ball that will certainly, I would imagine, make that transition a little bit easier. Because I think, one of the things we were so impressed with last year was that you're replacing, obviously, Fetter, who was amazing and had a fantastic career, but Xander came in and took such great care of the football, which is obviously, as a defensive guy, that's got to be the top priority, but also showed a lot of toughness. I was at the game against Wesleyan and rare time where I was sitting in the stands, and I saw him take that hit at the end of the first half. And I know he was hurt probably for the whole second half of that game, but he didn't come out of the game and he toughed it out. He was a tough kid. And you don't get a guy who's going to buy in and stick in the program without playing that long unless you're doing something right. I'm sure that's got to be the approach, right? Find someone who's been in the program, who's seen what the last two predecessors have done and try to carry on the tradition.
Yeah, it's the same way we lose Sean Clapp. Do we have anybody in the program that can play like Sean Clapp? I don't know. But somebody's got to play that position, and then the other guys have to play. If that guy can't be Sean Clapp, the other guys have to be a little bit better to offset that. And that's what college football is all about. I think we have a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball, but we have no idea who that is going to be taking the snaps.
Yeah.
We have good players there. One of them just has to basically say it with their actions in April during spring practice that, like, okay, I'm clearly the guy.
Yep. Well, listen, Dave, I don't know if you have anything else here, but I know we're right up against it, but we certainly appreciate you taking some time. We'll be paying attention to all the developments, both the playoff as well as obviously the roster limits, which I know even more so now. And I think hopefully some people listen to this and they hear some of the reasoning and the logic, because when I first heard it, my initial response was, rich getting richer. I'm pretty sure you can put together a roster of 90 guys at the Division III level or whatever it is and do just fine. But hearing your perspective, I now see it a little bit differently because I can put myself in those shoes of the college experience and wanting to be a part of a team. So hopefully some of the administrators and presidents hear this and understand that you're not trying to get 110 guys to play special teams. You're trying to,
I had an administrator tell me like a month ago, hey, Jeff, this is just a 1-year thing. The president's only voted this for 1 year. It might change next year. I said, yeah, tell that to the 22 student athletes who are currently on this campus, who I'm going to have to say, hey guys, sorry, but you can't participate in your sport anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
it doesn't work.
Why are we doing those kids? Those kids, most of them are never going to dress in a game. Most of them know they're never going to dress in a game.
Yeah.
But
at a minimum, they need to grandfather those kids in then if they want to say
they have
starting now.
Be transition.
Transition period.
But Coach, the only thing we would ask is when we have our preseason, our preview for the season, we'd love to have you on again to talk about Trinity football.
Be happy to do it, guys.
We certainly appreciate your time and wish you the best of luck for this year. We look forward to catching up with you early in the fall. I know Dave was trying to get as much information out of you as possible, but I give you credit for keeping it close to the best.
I know where his leniency lies, giving Dave anything.
Yeah.
By the way, congratulations on Sunday, Coach. Good game, good win.
I wasn't going to bring it up, Dave, but thank you. The Coach Cosgrove and his boys did a great job.
They sure did. Hey, you know what? It ended up working out for everybody. I think Wes was still the number 1 overall seed. So no harm, no foul. Yeah.
They were, and Joe Riley's a great Trinity guy.
He is great. Yeah, he is. There you go. Hey, my head coach was a Trinity guy. So Omak Dermott, another great Trinity guy. So there you go.
A lot of common connections at both schools. We certainly appreciate you taking the time and really enlightening us on, because like I said, I had never even thought about that perspective, and it makes a ton of sense. So we'll be paying attention. Hopefully someone else is as well. But for now, we are going to sign off. It's another edition of 9 Weeks in NESCAC Football Podcast. We want to thank head coach Devanney for joining us, as well as always, my co-host Dave Bagatelle. I'm Chris Grace. Until next time, thanks for listening or watching. So long, everybody.